Welcome to the State of Affairs in partnership with Serbian Radio Chicago. We are having conversations that matter. And I am so honored today to be joined by the legend, Roger Stone. He does not need much introduction. The man who has not done anything wrong. And I am very, very happy to have him on today. Roger, welcome.
Thank you very much, Olga. I very much appreciate it. For those who don't know me, and there may be a few of them, I'm a veteran of 13, actually, national Republican presidential campaigns, beginning with President Richard Nixon, 3 campaigns for governor, later President Ronald Reagan, and of course, most recently, for my friend of 45 years, Donald J. Trump. Also a New York Times best-selling author. I'm a political strategist by trade, but I have my own show, StoneZone.live, which you can see every day at 5 o'clock Eastern. I also do a weekend show at WABC Radio in New York. You can listen to that between 3 and 5 at WABCRadio.com.
Excellent. And we're going to have all of that information shared within this interview. But let's unpack what is happening this week. As I said, Roger Stone has done nothing wrong. Our dear friend, General Flynn, has done nothing wrong. And of course, President Trump has done nothing wrong. But here we are. We spoke a couple of days ago, very difficult week for our president. Tell us in a nutshell, what is going on?
Well, like my good friend General Flynn, like Donald Trump, I too was the subject of a completely politicized and weaponized judicial system in which charges were brought against me, despite the fact that I hadn't not only not done anything wrong, I also hadn't broken any laws. But it was a political effort to pressure me after Robert Mueller learned that there was no evidence of Russian collusion. Well, then they sought to create it. So in essence, I was charged for lying to Congress in my voluntary testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. And it was alleged that I lied to cover up Russian collusion, which of course now, based on the results of the special counsel's report by John Durham, there was no Russian collusion to lie about, which is what I said then and now. The real reason that I was charged, the real reason Donald Trump is charged today, in my case, it was to pressure me to bear false witness against him, to lie. The Department of Justice and Robert Mueller's thug prosecutors had identified some 29 phone conversations between myself and candidate Trump. They wanted me to testify that these phone conversations pertain somehow to Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration in the release of Hillary's emails. I already passed, at that point, 3 different polygraph tests, lie detector tests. It was a lie. I refused to do that. So I was basically condemned to a Soviet-style show trial in the District of Columbia. That's exactly what's going on now. Donald Trump is a force of nature. He's an existential threat to those who would move us to the New World Order. He's an existential threat to those who want, in essence, a surrender of American sovereignty and one world government. He is a threat to the Great Reset because he is stoutly pro-American. He is pro-American sovereignty. He's a pro-American freedom. He is a pro-America's special status among nations. And for that, they seek to destroy him. What has made them even more hysterical is as the country is suffering under the burden of Joe Biden's policies, with the highest gasoline prices, a 76% increase in the cost of basic groceries, epic inflation that is ravaging working families, open borders, which lead to a crime epidemic in the country, to a drug epidemic in the country. When combined with Joe Biden's inability to string together a sentence or to stand up without falling down, and now with evidence of the epic corruption of the Biden crime family, Donald Trump leads Joe Biden in every poll, despite their repeated efforts to try to accuse him of completely fabricated crimes where he's actually done nothing wrong. So, as you know, Olga, he was charged some months ago with this ridiculous idea that he mishandled top secret government documents. According to the 1977 Presidential Records Act, upheld in the DC courts, specifically by the judge who presided over my trial, Donald Trump can do anything with the documents he wants. It is not possible, legally possible, for him to mishandle them. Joe Biden, on the other hand, retained top secret documents when he was a U.S. senator, and when he was vice president. He had no authority to have them. He had no authority over how to dispose of them. He's actually the one who's broken the law. The investigation by Special Counsel Jack Smith has already spent more than $25 million to try to find some crime by Donald Trump or to try to create one. They've spent less than $1 million investigating Joe Biden, who had approximately 5 times as many boxes of top secret documents than Donald Trump. That investigation, you hear nothing whatsoever about. So now they are basically criminalizing Donald Trump's absolute constitutional right to question the outcome of the last election. Every American has the right to say, in my opinion, based on what I have read and seen, that election was not honest, fair, or transparent. I believe that election was flawed, was corrupted. He has a right to say that. They're basically now want to prosecute him simply because he said that. They have not charged him with seditious conspiracy, although they seek, rhetorically at least, to hold him responsible for the riot at the Capitol, even though he's not charged with any crime in connection with the riot at the Capitol. So basically, he's being prosecuted in this case for thought crimes. In other words, I guess the moral of the story is that if you question the outcome of an American election, that's a crime for which you should go to prison, unless, of course, you are Kamala Harris or Chuck Schumer or Congressman Jerry Nadler or Vice President Kamala Harris, as I said, or Congressman Jamie Raskin.
Or Maxine Waters.
Or Maxine Waters or Stacey Abrams, in which case it's perfectly all right for you in 2016, in 2000, in 2018 to question the outcome of the election. So what is perfectly okay for a Democrat is not okay for a Republican. That's basically what they're telling us.
So we do have obviously a two-tiered justice system, and it's been a witch hunt from what I can see, and being deeply involved in the campaign since 2015 and 2016, that day when President Trump came down that escalator. And of course, you were there, and all of the people that we know were around. It's been a coup and a regime change, essentially, that has been ongoing. So let's talk about 2020. To me, looking at what has happened around the world, and the Balkans come to mind consistently, I've argued that the colored revolution and regime change has come here. Chickens have come home to roost. President Trump has been the target of that, with all of the agencies weaponized against him, but not only against him, against all of you and against 80 plus million Americans who have certain political opinions. How is it possible that we are here in this nation that was always the pillar of freedom, the last pillar of freedom on earth?
Well, it's because we have currently in office a completely corrupt regime, but it would be a mistake to say that, well, this is a difference between Republicans and Democrats, because in truth, the real division in Washington, the real division in the country is between the insiders, the ruling global elites, and an outsider who is unabashedly American and pro-America freedom like Donald Trump. So he is an existential threat to the two-party duopoly, which is systematically seeking to erase our constitutional freedoms and our constitutional protections. Donald Trump, who I've known for 45 years, and who I have huge respect for, who I think was a very great president in his first term, despite the efforts of some of those that he himself appointed to undermine or dilute or slow down or even cancel his America First agenda, he did go to Washington with the naive view that there were two parties, Republicans and Democrats, and the Republicans would rally around him the way they rallied around Ronald Reagan, who was, like Donald Trump, an outsider who beat the Republican establishment to become president. And he was wrong about that. Half of the Republicans were trying to remove him from the instant he was sworn in. This is the way it works. First, they try to beat you, but once they cannot beat you, they try to co-opt you. They try to surround you and co-opt you. When you look at the impact of Trump's policies, they weren't terribly successful, meaning he did rebuild our military strength. He did appoint hundreds of conservative-minded and constitutionally oriented judges to the judiciary. He did rebuild the most robust, productive economy in American history, not once, but twice. Yeah. In order to beat him, they had to weaponize the COVID-19 pandemic, which they used very, very skillfully for completely political purposes. That forced Trump to change his fundamental campaign style because the campaign rally and all of the publicity and messaging that surrounded them became impossible as the country was on lockdown. And they also used it to rationalize the mail-in ballot, which has not been a part of our tradition. We always had absentee ballots, meaning when voters are too sick to get to the polls, or they're too infirm or disabled and can't get to the polls, or if they're on military service, or if they have a legitimate business reason to be outside the country or outside the state, which they can document, then they would be entitled to an absentee ballot. But the 2020 election is the first election in which we had these mass-based mail-in ballots. So, for example, in Nevada, every single voter on the voting rolls is mailed a mail-in ballot, whether they've requested one or not. Yeah. Last time I was in Las Vegas, actually 2 times ago, a man came up to me and he had 5 ballots, all of them sent to the same address, but in the names of 5 different people. Only one of them was his. The other 4 were other names. And I said, "What is this?" He said, "Well, I did some research. Those are the names of the 4 people who rented my apartment before I did. One of them rented the apartment 10 years ago. The other one rented the apartment 7 years ago. The other one rented my apartment 5 years ago. None of them I can find. I don't think they live in Nevada. They may not even be alive, but they're still on the voter rolls. If I were dishonest, which I'm not, I could easily have voted 5 times for Donald Trump. But if I did that, it would be illegal and I'd probably get arrested, or maybe I wouldn't. Who knows? In any event, he said, I'm casting my own ballot and I'm throwing the others away, or at least I'm saving them for evidence. It's a perfect example of the kind of abuses that we have seen. Sure. Just today, former Attorney General Bill Barr attacked me, saying that if I hadn't said before the election that Trump should declare victory whether he lost or not, that's a complete bastardization of what I said. What I said was, if on election night it's still undecided, it's in dispute, it's still up in the air, then I think Trump should declare victory. This is precisely the same evidence, the same advice that former Secretary of State James A. Baker gave to George W. Bush. Everybody hailed him as a genius because that's political strategy and public relations. Yes, perception, or in this case, possession, or in this case, the perception of possession is 9/10 of the law, of the dynamic. But I never said if Trump lost, he should declare victory. I have no question in my mind that then and now Donald Trump believes in his heart that he won that election. And therefore, all these charges against him are based on a theory, on an argument that he knew that he had lost, but was moving to cling to power in illegal ways. That hinges on a supposition that Trump knew in his mind, in his heart, that he lost. He never believed that. He could pass a lie detector test today that would demonstrate that he never believed that. So this is an outrage. Now, I think people in Europe are less surprised by this because there's a great tradition in Europe of despots locking up their political opponents. Happens all the time. Happened in Germany, happened in Russia, certainly happens in China, happens in many Eastern European countries. That's a very similar situation in 1963 when Americans were shocked by the brutal assassination of John Kennedy. Europeans were not surprised at all. Assassinations took place throughout the history of Europe. World War I was sparked by an assassination. So yes, Europeans were not surprised by this, as sad as they may have been about it. But if you think about it through history, who is it who has locked up their opponent? Donald Trump is the leading candidate for president in the Republican Party, and he's leading Joe Biden in the polls by, as the president would say, a lot. So what is their answer to the fact that they're headed towards losing power if we can, in fact, secure an honest, fair, transparent election? Why, it is to try to lock Donald Trump up, to try to smear him, to try to denigrate his name, maybe even, it remains to be seen, charge him with some crime that might legally disqualify him from even being a candidate. There is only one crime that would do that. That is the crime of sedition. He has not been charged with that as of yet. He's going to be tried for that because they're trying to imply in these charges that he, based on his First Amendment use of his opinion, is responsible for the riot at the Capitol. But in truth, now that his Twitter feed has been restored, even though he's not using it, we can go back and see where he specifically told people not to storm the Capitol, not to respect those in law enforcement. Those tweets were unavailable until recently. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about 2020 in expectation of 2024. From what I know, not a whole lot has changed from state to state in terms of election laws. And of course, we are all going to back President Trump. We understand that he's leading in the polls, in the Republican polls, and overall, as you just said. But Roger, you know this better than all of us. You've been a veteran of every single election that I can think of. Can we vote ourselves out of this mess, given that nothing really has changed on the books?
Well, you raise a very, very good question. We should have had substantial election law reform in a number of states. That hasn't happened. The people at the Republican National Committee are completely worthless. They do nothing other than take your dollars. The Republican National Chairwoman, she uses a private jet. She stays in 5-star hotel suites. She has her own hairdresser and her own makeup makeup artist, but that's how they're spending your money. There's not been any comprehensive drive for state election law reform. And even in those places where it's been attempted, Pennsylvania being the best example, there's no doubt whatsoever that mail-in ballots very specifically violate the state constitution in Pennsylvania. There's no question about that. The lower courts have held that. The Court of Common Pleas has held that. But then a very political left-wing Pennsylvania State Supreme Court overturned that and reinstated mail-in ballots. They're simply wrong. Can that be appealed to this U.S. Supreme Court? Yes. Will that appeal be heard? We have no idea. Will that appeal be heard before the next presidential election? We don't know. Unlikely. Well, I'll be honest with you. In the city of Philadelphia, without any dispute, more people voted than are registered to vote. How is that possible? That's not possible. Yet the courts, like they did in Arizona, they ignore extensive evidence of election fraud. There's a very, very interesting case in Delaware County brought by Gregory Stenstrom and Leah Hoops, where they have demonstrated, they've absolutely proved the corruption of that election and the illegal actions by a number who failed to investigate or had evidence of that corruption but failed to do anything about it at the state and federal level. That case is still alive. You may ask me, well, how come I've heard nothing about it? To which I say, precisely, exactly. Why is this not being reported? Well, one thing I can tell you, it won't be reported on Fox News because Fox News is now allergic to reporting on any matter regarding election integrity. When they were sued by Dominion, they should not have settled. They should have said, yes, let's go to trial. Rupert Murdoch and his family are billionaires. They can afford the lawyers, and they had the facts at their fingertips to prove the election was corrupted, and instead they folded. Huge mistake.
Well, so in anticipation, obviously, of 2024, let's assume everything will be okay and we can vote ourselves out of the mess and the elections will be fair and free. Looking at the Democratic primary, very, very interesting and I think very impactful and important announcement is by Robert Kennedy Jr. I know that you are the first one who has kind of brought up this idea of him being a VP pick for President Trump. I think that's brilliant. It would be a unity ticket for sure. It would unify the country. It would bring up the anti-establishment and most importantly, anti-war element of this nation together. But is it legally possible looking at state to state? Would that be something President Trump would even consider?
It's an abstract idea at best. First of all, neither man would be terribly interested in this today. I don't know Robert Kennedy well. I would not call us friends. I would call us casual acquaintances. He spoke at a conference at which I spoke. The Biden opposition research people take that photo and they splatter it all over social media saying, here's proof that Robert Kennedy is just a pawn, just a ringer controlled by Roger Stone and Steve Bannon, who I don't even speak to. It is Stone who urged him to run. That's not true. It is Stone who's advising his campaign. That's not true. I do admire the fact that he stands up for peace and freedom, that he's against this war and the squandering of these national resources. When we have 370,000 homeless veterans in this country, why are we shipping $1 billion to Ukraine, which most of which is, I think we all know, being grafted by politicians anyway? I also think that his concern for the middle class, his concern about the rising cost of gasoline, his concern about the rising cost of groceries, his concern about the lack of access to affordable housing, which is a huge issue across the country, his desire to close our southern border, to stop the crime and drug epidemic in this country. These are things that I admire. So I admit to you that I admire him. I don't think he's going to be given a fair, honest shot in the Democratic primaries. I think they will cheat him the way they cheated Bernie Sanders, but for different reasons. And I think at the end of his candidacy, there will be a large number of disaffected Democrats and independents and some Republicans who gravitated to support his candidacy, but who will not be prepared to vote for Joe Biden or whichever Democrat they choose to replace Joe Biden as the establishment Democrat candidate. A number of states, almost 30 states, require that if you're going to be on the ballot in the general election as a Republican nominee for federal office, you must be a registered member of that party. Yes. I don't see Robert Kennedy giving up his birthright as the nephew of President John F. Kennedy, a great Democrat president, or his father, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., former U.S. Senator and Attorney General, I don't see him ever becoming a Republican. I do think, however, his voter base could end up inuring to the benefit of Donald Trump. I do think that Donald Trump would be free, let's say, to pledge that if he's elected, he would appoint Robert Kennedy as Attorney General and give him the authority and the power to clean up the deep state and to clean out those federal agencies that oversee questions of public health and drugs. I do think Trump does have that power. So I think that movement within the Democratic Party is very, very important and could ultimately inure to the benefit of Donald Trump. Is there some secret plan? No, I'm sorry, Olga, there is no secret plan. Is Robert Kennedy's candidacy, is he a ringer? Is he some kind of a pawn? Is he being manipulated? No, he is just a very brilliant young man who knows his own mind and I think can very articulately argue his issue positions. Is he going to become president? I think it's very, very tough. Is his candidacy going to impact this upcoming election? It's going to impact it extraordinarily. That is why he is being subjected to the most brutal censorship that we have ever seen. In other words, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, they not only censor what he actually says, but they smear him. They try to paint him as some kind of conspiracy theorist, as opposed to giving him an opportunity to speak and letting the people decide whether they believe him or not. And then the most outrageous part of this is the decision by the Department of Homeland Security not to give him Secret Service protection when both his father and his uncle were brutally murdered while running for president of the United States. This is outrageous. So on the one hand, they stir up hatred and animus against him, which could put in the mind of some madman, of some lunatic, to kill him. But then in the next breath, they won't give him Secret Service protection, which under the law he is eligible for, but they have the discretion to deny him, which they have done. This is an outrage.
Interestingly enough, knowing that we have the dementia patient running the asylum with his corrupt son and the entire family, obviously we have seen numerous evidence of corruption through Ukraine and China and elsewhere. Who could that Democratic nominee be, possibly, given that I believe Democrats understand that Joe Biden and his entire family has become a big burden for them?
Well, I've been very forthright about this, and I know it's quite controversial, but I still believe at the end of the day that Barack Obama is the single most dominant and influential figure in the Democratic Party. I actually think today, to a great extent, he is your de facto president. All of the top aides and advisors and cabinet members, for that matter, around Joe Biden are actually Obama people. Yes. And I do think that it's possible that there may come a point in which the Democrats realize that Joe Biden's prospects for re-election are zero because of the weight of the corruption surrounding his brother and his son and the entire Biden crime family. Let's be very clear. We now have absolute proof of extortion, bribery, money laundering, influence peddling, illegal lobbying, and let's just say it, treason. Biden and members of his family have received millions of dollars from Russia, from China, from Ukraine, from Romania, as well as other interests. And that can no longer be denied. No, it's not Russian disinformation. No, it's not a conspiracy theory. And Biden's story, as you know, Olga, keeps changing. First it was he knows nothing about his son's business. Then it becomes, well, he was never in business with his son. Then it becomes, well, he never met or spoke to any of Hunter Biden's foreign business associates. Now it is, well, he met with them and spoke to them, but they only discussed the weather. That's like saying, well, when Monica Lewinsky went to the Oval Office with Bill Clinton, all they did was talk about the weather. It's not credible. So the time may come when the Democrats realize that Joe Biden simply cannot be credibly reelected, no matter how many votes they steal. And that's when I think they will replace him with Michelle Obama. Now, just to show you how much politics changes and how it can change quickly, I made this prediction many months ago. There's a number of pieces of evidence on which I base it. The changes in the Democratic primary schedule, the essentially stripping the delegates from the Iowa caucuses, stripping the delegates from the New Hampshire primary, elevating South Carolina to be the first primary contest in their party, state that has an absolute majority African Americans in the Democratic primary electorate. The announcement that the convention will be held in Chicago, Michelle Obama's own activities, modeled almost exactly after her husband's trail to the presidency. She has founded a nonprofit organization that goes out and registers voters, just like he did. She has written 2 largely fictional biographies to create a backstory, which is essentially not true. She did not grow up poor on the South Side. She grew up in upper middle class surroundings. She visited France with her junior high school class as a child. That doesn't sound underprivileged to me. No, she was not a victim of white flight. She was one of the high-powered lawyers driving poor and middle-class Black people out of their homes on behalf of the city of Chicago and driving them out of the public health care system. So they have a new problem, however, and that is, I just read this headline before we went on, but there's more and more evidence that the death of the personal chef at the Obama's home or near their home in Martha's Vineyard, there are more questions here than answers. The Massachusetts State Police and the Edgartown, Massachusetts Police are stonewalling it. They will not identify who the second person who was allegedly with the chef when the chef drowned while paddleboarding. They insist that he was 100 feet from shore. They insist that the water there was 8 feet deep. I have run the bathymetric studies that show that at 100 feet off of shore, the depth of the water in this pond is 3 feet, not 8 feet, 3 feet. That means he could stand up. How can one drown? First of all, when you can grab a paddleboard which floats. Secondarily, they won't identify who was with him other than to say it was a woman. We don't even know if that's right. They won't tell us the woman's name. Why not? And then their story keeps changing. First, they said, well, the Obamas were not on Martha's Vineyard. Well, that's not true. By the way, Martha's Vineyard is very small. So if they weren't home, they had to be within 5 miles because it's just not that big. Then they said, well, they were in Martha's Vineyard, but they weren't home. Well, if they weren't home, where were they? They won't answer that question. Then they said the distress call to police, the police report didn't come from the Obama's home, their compound. It came from a different house. Then they said, no, that's not right. It did come from the Obama's house, but they won't identify who phoned it in. The whole thing is extraordinarily suspicious. Tafari Campbell, that's the chef who tragically drowned or was drowned. We don't know the answer. He is married with kids, but where was his wife? Where are his children? When he is living in the Obama's home in Martha's Vineyard, where is his family? We don't know the answer to this. Now, there will be an autopsy. There will be a toxicology report. But Olga, I'm prepared to bet you that we'll never hear anything more about them. They will never become public documents. Donald Trump's tax returns, which are supposed to be by law confidential, secret, they were leaked to the New York Times. How's that possible? But we'll never be able to find out what really happened. Here's the question. Will questions about the death of the Obama's chef limit or end her trajectory towards the White House? Because I'm telling you right now, she's running. She is their backup candidate. What would happen here is Joe Biden would hang on as long as he could. But in late November, before the actual filing deadlines to get on the ballot, to win the delegates to be renominated. They will announce that because of his very poor health, that he, unfortunately, this great statesman, who's doing a fabulous job as president, by the way, that he's not running again. And then the party will draft Michelle Obama. Now, those who say, well, what about Gavin Newsom? I'm sorry, the Democratic Party cannot nominate a white man for president, not when you have a sitting woman of color as vice president. And
they have to all the marks.
And they have to somehow justify bypassing Kamala Harris for the presidential nomination, because in the normal political discount, the vice president would be in line for that nomination.
Yes.
But they recognize that even though she doesn't have dementia, that she makes even less sense than Joe Biden. I mean, there's something not right about her. All she does is giggle, and she makes no sense whatsoever. It's very hard to believe that she was once a U.S. senator and once the attorney general of the state of California, because she doesn't seem to be a very serious person who has any serious thoughts. So, but the party chieftains can get her out of the way. The Obamas will promise her a Supreme Court nomination if she will simply step aside and let Michelle have the nomination. The Obamas can raise $100 million overnight. They can get the necessary signatures to get Michelle on the ballot overnight. Now, I'm going to stick with my prediction. Despite this little bump in the road in Martha's Vineyard, I still believe Michelle Obama will ultimately be the Democratic nominee for president. Olga, how am I so sure? Here's why I'm sure. She continues to say she has no interest whatsoever and she hates politics. There it is. There's the proof. In politics, always look at the opposite of what people say, and you'll find the truth, certainly among Democrats.
Fantastic advice, but let's put that in perspective then. President Trump, who we are certain will be winning our nomination, our Republican nomination, despite DeSantis and Joe Biden and Pence, Mike Pence, and all of the other competitors. Michelle Obama against President Trump. Thoughts on that?
A very, very difficult race. I mean, first of all, I know that there are some who like to make jokes about, Michelle Obama's sexual gender or orientation. If you do that, the media will destroy you. They will call you a hater. They will call you a racist. They will say that you're against trans people, that it's some kind of a smear. That's a trap. Those who fall into that trap make an enormous mistake. Michelle Obama would be an extraordinarily well-funded and very well-liked public figure because she's never really been in politics, while in fact she's been in politics the whole time. Can Donald Trump beat her? Yes, but only by exposing her real background, which has nothing to do with her sexual gender or orientation and has everything to do with her real record. Everything she said about her background is a lie. She did not grow up poor. She was never disadvantaged. She was never subject to discrimination in her life. Her guidance counselor in high school did not tell her that she couldn't get into Princeton because she's Black. That's a lie. The woman can be found. She never said that. But she did work for the city of Chicago as a lawyer, basically driving poor Black people out of their public housing and off of the city's overburdened healthcare system. So I think when all Americans, as well as Black Americans, find out the truth about who Michelle Obama really is, I think that she is beatable. But let us not think that this is a joke, because it's not a joke. Let's not think that it's not serious, because it is quite serious. And trust me, she would be quite formidable.
Absolutely. And let's switch gears here. And many people don't know this, but and you don't know it, but you've been a great inspiration for the initiative, which was Serbs for Trump. And when we launched that and you and I met, you told me, well, you know yourself, I got served. And so did we in the 1990s, as you well know. But looking at that foreign policy piece, and in our mind, and many of our voters and our viewers here are very foreign policy oriented. And that was a big piece for us with President Trump. They certainly knew what they were getting into with Hillary Clinton and voted against her. And those districts where Serbian Americans lived in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, they actually swung those votes from Hillary Clinton to President Trump. Richard Grenell worked on the Serbia-Kosovo issue. President Trump was somebody who brought a breath of fresh air to foreign policy in general. Looking at this Ukraine fiasco that we are going through right now, which again, we are convinced that this trajectory of regime change and colored revolution stemming from the Clintons in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia and Serbia, into Libya, into Syria, into Ukraine, certainly with Victoria Nuland in 2014, handing out muffins and baked goods while the country was burning down. Here we are. What can we expect from President Trump if he certainly wins his next term? Because the war in Ukraine does not seem to stop, and we are certainly facing a nuclear annihilation.
Donald Trump is the peace candidate. What you can expect if Donald Trump is elected is peace in Eastern Europe. Look, the Russians respect only strength. They do not respect weakness. They exploit predictability. Joe Biden is extremely predictable. He's weak. They know that he's weak. They saw his foreign policy failures in Iran. They see his attempt to re-up the Iranian arms deal. They see him bowing at the altar of climate change, where the biggest polluters on the face of the planet, the Chinese, will pay nothing, but they want Americans and Serbians to pay for amelioration. There is climate change in the country. The climate changes 4 times a year. It's called change of season. There's no evidence that emissions are destroying the planet. That is a falsehood. That is a lie. Now, this video will probably get censored because I had the honesty to say that. The point is, I think Donald Trump will bring stability and peace to the region. As someone who is of Hungarian ancestry, I feel very close to the Serbian people because we are very, very similar in our cultures. But I think Donald Trump believes in freedom, and he believes mostly, I think, in peace and freedom for the region.
Well, so speaking of Hungary, Viktor Orban certainly is leading that freedom movement in Europe, while the rest of Europe is shooting themselves in the foot and in the head with what they are doing to themselves, given Ukrainian fiasco and the war we are going through and we are seeing live. I believe the Democrats who are behind Joe Biden are miscalculating. We are edging closer and closer to nuclear war. As I said, what do you foresee now? Because quite frankly, 2024, in light of this, is very, very far away.
Well, it's actually very frightening because we don't even have peace talks going on. In other words, a prudent president, a wise president, would at least be engaged in some discussions to stop the killing. When we now know that there were at least 2 tentative peace deals that could have stopped the killing and could have short-circuited the possibility of World War III, and they were both scuttled by the Biden State Department. So these people are, in fact, inching up closer and closer to World War III. Many people in the United States, unfortunately, believe the mainstream media war propaganda that would tell you that the Ukrainians are kicking the daylights out of the Russians, that the Russians are losing, that the offensive, the more recent offensive by the Ukrainians has been incredibly successful. All of that is false. I'm not a military man, but General Michael Flynn, Colonel McGregor, someone who I followed very closely, they have argued based on their vast military experience and their knowledge of the region that Putin is achieving his goals on the battlefield and that the Ukrainians basically are running out of ammunition, which is why they keep coming back to us for more money and for more sophisticated weapons. And you can kind of plot this. First, Biden said he would not give them these Sherman tanks. Next thing you know, he's giving them these tanks. Then says he won't give them cluster bombs. Then he is giving them cluster bombs. Then he says he will not give them long-range missiles. Then he is giving them long-range missiles. We are in the process of arming a maniac who has already, based on leaked documents we've seen, says that if he gets long-range missiles, he will launch an attack deep into Russia. Does anyone think that the Russians will not respond to that in kind? So we are right now on the cusp of World War III. How do we deal with this? I'll tell you how I deal with it. I pray. I pray every day, morning and night. I pray silently when I'm driving the car. I've got to go pick up a prescription at the drugstore from my wife after this. I'm going to say my prayers in the car on the way. I'm a great believer in prayer and in the power of prayer. Now, I know that liberals and atheists and elitists will hear that and they'll laugh. How quaint, Roger Stone believes in God. Well, I don't really care what they think. In all honesty, Olga, I only care what he thinks. I don't believe based on, Psalm 110. I don't believe based on Psalm 91 that the Lord will allow the destruction of this last best hope of freedom and peace in the world, the United States. So the question is, can we hang on until Donald Trump is restored to the White House? Can we find a path to restore him to the White House? In conclusion, let me say I pray for both of those things every single day.
Fascinating insight, and I join you in that prayer. Thank you so much for being with us today. And everybody remember, Roger Stone did nothing wrong.
Thank you very much, Olga. God bless you.
God bless you as well.